This is a quick overview of logging into the new Arkansas Master Naturalist website and beginning to record your hours. The new temporary address is, you can see in your upper left-hand corner, nwamn18.clubexpress.com. Eventually there'll be a redirect from arkansasmasternaturalist.org, but for now we're using the temporary address. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the words Member Login. If you've not logged in yet, and you don't know your username and password, look for the link that says Forgot My Username Password. And when you click on that, it asks for your email address that you've used with our organization. And your first name is optional. If there are two members of your household using this address for Arkansas Master Naturalists, you would put your first name to make sure you got yours. You'll then get an email with your username and a temporary password that you can use to log in. You'll want to change that temporary password after you're logged in. If you always use the same computer and you're not worried about other people seeing your login, it's handy to use Remember Me on this computer. Then you don't have to type it in every time. I'm going to use an imaginary member that we use for testing, and we do this so that we don't mess up somebody's record and accidentally record something there. So I'm logging in as Curious George, just so that we can see how this website works. After you've logged in, you see the home page for the state site, and you see the menu across the top that shows the various features of the website, not all of which are working yet. You can also use this on your phone or other mobile device. It works very well on phone displays, and you're able to log your hours, so you could do that while you're at an event. It also works well on tablets, although everything doesn't display as well on a tablet. But the site has a very good mobile view. To log your hours or change your temporary password, you would mouse over your name that shows in the upper right-hand corner and go to Profile. If you need to change your temporary password, you would click Username and Password, and it would prompt you to enter the password that you want to use permanently. To start entering your hours, you'd click Volunteer Time Tracking, and you'll see that we've already entered a couple of things for George, just as samples. So as you enter things, you'll see a list in date order of the things that you've recorded, and you'll see the beginnings of the accumulation of your hours. Training hours is the same thing as continuing ed. So the 8 hours that you need to become certified per year will accumulate under training hours. So George currently has 1. Volunteer time plus the travel to the volunteer time shows here. So you can see that we already have one thing entered that George worked on, the Native Plant Project at the Botanical Garden of the Ozarks for 2 hours, and there was a 15-minute trip to and from that site from George's home. And then we have 1 training hour, so that's under continuing ed, and the sponsor there is Hobbs. So I have a 0 under volunteer, but now I have 1 on training. It took a half hour to get there and home, and so we have 1 training hour accumulated. Right now the total hours is kind of varying how it's being added. So for now, we're mostly looking at your training hours, which is just your continuing education, and the volunteer hours plus travel hours. Now, if you entered something and you're looking at it and you realize you made a mistake, you can click on the pencil, which represents edit, and you can go in and change any of those fields. For example, one thing I always do is it puts it on the date you pulled up the site, and I always forget to change that. So perhaps George really worked at the Botanical Garden on April 18th. So I can easily go back and change that. Okay, and I'm going to save, and that saves my changes now. All right, so to enter something, just so that you see that, when you click Add, here's your screen for adding both volunteer hours and continuing education or advanced training. So again, I try to remember to do my date first. So I am going to enter that George on May the 6th volunteered to go pick up litter. Now, you've got a list to choose from of different volunteer activities, and you'll pick the one that most closely matches. For example, native plant can cover a lot of things, but we're interested in tracking the general areas that you are volunteering in. So pick the one that fits the best for you. So in this case, I'm going to do litter pickup, and I went out to, or George went out to Hobbs State Park, walked a trail and picked up litter as he went. And you'll notice these red dots, those are required fields. So I have to say what volunteer activity I did and who it was for. It could have easily been for a chapter. You'll notice that all the chapters are listed. Or an area or an agency, could have been for the highway department. So again, pick the one that fits the best for you. And George picked up litter for an hour and 15 minutes. And it took him a half hour to get there and a half hour back. Or he also could add these 15-minute increments. And we generally say round up if you don't have the exact amount. And so now I filled in all my required areas for that. Travel miles are optional. That's more for your use. If you want to do for tax purposes, or if you're just curious how many miles did I drive this year as I did my naturalist activities, you can fill that in. We don't use it, so that's entirely up to you whether you fill in miles. But it is very helpful to fill in notes as to what you did. This is pretty specific, but if you had put something like trail maintenance, that you went out to Hobbs and did trail maintenance or building, then it's helpful for the agencies to know, did you clear deadfall from a trail? Did you repair a trail? Did you pick up litter? Did you do invasive removal? Or did you actually help build a new piece of trail? At the end of the year, these notes are broken down and often reported to agencies so they know both how many hours that our organization volunteered, but also what kinds of activities they did. So it is helpful, unless you've picked something pretty specific, to put a note. Once I've got this filled out, I'll hit save, and now I've added to my totals for volunteer hours. Okay, now we'll do a continuing ed. For your advanced training or continuing ed, there's only one choice on this list: continuing education. You will notice if you were a knit this year that knit training class is one of the choices. That's intended for use next year so that the knits can keep track of their hours as they go through the training. So you should not enter it if you are a knit this year. At the moment, it is totaling in your continuing education hours, so it will throw off your total if you have your knit hours in there. Probably at some point, if they're entered, we'll take them out this year. And you will be notified when they're taken out so that your training hours will correctly reflect what you've done. So if you haven't entered your knit hours, please don't. If you have, we'll probably take them out at some point. All right, so continuing education is the choice. And again, you're going to put, where did you get that continuing education? Perhaps you went to BioBlast. You count all the sessions there. Perhaps you attended something from another organization. Perhaps you went to a talk at Audubon and learned about bird habitat there. So you can count that. Again, we just want to know the sponsor. You can count how long your learning activity lasted. And again, the travel hours are still required for this. So maybe it only took, again, 30 minutes round trip to go there. Again, very helpful to just make a quick note. As to what your training was. Miles are optional. Hit save. And now I've got 2 hours and 15 minutes of training. All right. It's still helpful for this year because this is the first time this company has created this tracking app. It probably still would be helpful to maintain a paper backup just in case. But so far this app is working very well. If you're having any problems with it, please contact your chapter webmaster or your chapter president and they can help you with it. Thanks a lot for being a Master Naturalist.